You might be wondering why I'm wearing the same exact shirt from last vlog. It's because it's still Saturday and I just busted that tournament, the $365 big one, 30K guarantee at Texas Card House, Dallas. So I drove over to Las Colinas TCH Social, where I'm probably going to end up playing the 1-2 300 max buy-in no limit cash game. So anyway, I'll see you guys in there. Let's have some fun and get some good hands for the vlog.
It's been so nice being back on the felt and grinding cash games and tournaments, and today I'm here to play some 1-2 no limit hold'em 300 max buy-in at TCH Social in Las Colinas. Let's get into some hands. Prior to this hand, I had lost $20 where there was a straddle to $5. I raised with Queen 9 of Hearts to 20, and unfortunately, someone went all in for $100. And because it was my first hand at the table, they all jokingly said, "Welcome to the table." So hopefully this means this table is going to be a little bit crazy. So in this hand, the $5 straddle is on, and then the player next to act limps for $5. It folds around to me on the button, and I look down at King 9 of Hearts. We're gonna get in the mix and raise this one up, so I make it $20 to go. The straddle and the limper call, so we are gonna go 3 ways to a flop of Jack, 10, 9 with 2 spades, so we flop ourselves bottom pair on this very wet and dynamic board. It checks over to me on the button, and on this type of board texture, we have bottom pair on a very wet board where my opponents are going to have a lot of hands that are going to continue. Our opponents are going to continue with all their 10x, Jack X, and obviously straight draws, flush draws, gutters, all sorts of things. So because of all these reasons, there's no point to put any money in this pot, as we do have showdown value, and we don't want to turn our hand into a bluff. We don't block any of the flush draws. We do block some straight draws, which is nice, but we're just going to check this one back. The turn is the 3 of diamonds, and it checks over to me yet again. Again, for the same reasons on the flop, there's really no reason to put money in this pot. Even if we put out a bet, it's not going to deter our opponents from calling with pretty much any holding that they want to continue with, so I check back again. The river is another jack, and it checks to me one last time. So if we went for value here, what worse would we try to get called by? Ace high perhaps? King high? Maybe? Possibly? But with our pair of 9s, I would love to just check here, retain our showdown value, and hopefully just take down the pot. And that's exactly what happens, as I have the best hand with my pair of 9s, and we take down our first pot of the session. In this hand, the $5 straddle is on, and there are 2 limps next to act. It folds around to me on the button, and I look down at pocket queens in a straddled pot, the absolute dream, on the button, so I raise it up to $25. The small blind, who looks like somewhat of a competent player, although I have no idea how he plays, he 3-bets to 75. Then the original $5 straddler rips all in for about $200. What is happening? It folds around to me on the button, and because the straddler has about $200, we don't have any other choice here than to rip all in and hope that the small blind, who raised to 75, has a hand like ace king. So I indeed do go all in. The small blind then thinks for quite a while. At this point, I'm pretty sure he has a hand like ace king. The small blind ends up putting in the fold. The straddler, who looks to be like a recreational player there to have a good time, asks me how many times I want to run it. And honestly, it does not matter. Over time, variance evens out. So whether you run it once, twice, 3 times, it doesn't matter. So because that's my viewpoint, if they ask, I always leave it up to them and say, it's up to you. I want to keep them happy, especially rec players at these 1-2 games. He's here to have fun. I want to keep them coming back and having a good time. So I say, okay, let's run it twice. And here's what happened. So we are actually in great shape, as my opponent had pocket jacks, and we end up getting an almost full double up here in this 1-2 game in my second hand of the night. Shortly before this hand happened, I lost about $55 on a double board no limit bomb pot where I flop trip 7s with 7-4 suited, so I flop trips on one board and nothing at all on the second board, and my opponent was bombing away. I ended up putting in the fold and got to see his hand, and he had a better 7 than me, so luckily we got away fairly cheap on the turn. And then this hand happened where there's a raise under the gun to $10. A player in middle position makes the call, and then I look down at king queen offsuit. Normally I would put in the 3-bet here, but I was busy ordering food, got distracted, and put in the call, which I do not like at all. The small blind and the big blind call as well, so we are going to go 5 ways to a flop of queen And I'm not sure what the other two cards were, but I know they were spades. I think they were lower cards. So maybe it was something like Queen 9-6 with 2 spades, something like that. So we actually flop a very good hand here with our pair of queens and a king kicker. The small and big blind check around to the under the gun raiser, and he bets $35. The player on my right folds, and now it's on me, and I put in the call. I don't see any merit to raising, especially from a player who raised under the gun and then bet into multiple players. So he's repping a very, very strong range. The others fold, so now we're going to go heads up to a turn card, which is another spade. Again, I apologize, I don't have notes, but I know it wasn't a Broadway card, it was another low card. I would assume that this card is going to slow my opponent down a lot, as I'm going to have quite a bit more flushes in this spot than my opponent is, and he is out of position, so he does have to be a bit concerned. But that does not stop him at all. My opponent continues betting for $100. Now it's on me. This is such a crappy spot. I'm already regretting just flatting pre-flop, where I would normally either 3-bet or fold, but obviously king-queen is too strong to fold. Unfortunately, we do not have a spade in our hand. We have a 1-pair holding, and if my opponent has a hand like pocket aces with the ace of spades, pocket kings, ace queen, or a hand like ace king of spades for a turned flush, we are in horrible, horrible shape. And for this bet size, if I'm going to call the turn, I'm probably going to have to call almost every single non-spade river. So because of all those reasons, I land on a fold. Very unhappy with the way I played this hand because of my pre-flop choices, but we're going to shake off the L and move on to the next one. In this hand, the $5 straddle is on yet again, and there's a limper in early position, and then the player to my right, who is a pretty aggressive, competent player, raises to $20. I'm next to act and still distracted by my food situation, so normally I would love to raise this spot as I look down at ace 10 of clubs, and I would make it something like $60, $65, but instead I landed on a call where I normally would probably put in a 3-bet, although this hand in particular can go either way between flatting or 3-betting. So I put in the call, and we head to a flop of 8-5-4 with 2 spades. It checks over to my opponent. He bets $65. This is a pretty large bet into multiple opponents, especially on this type of board texture, so it's highly likely that my opponent has a hand like an overpair. Unfortunately, I don't flop much of anything. There's not even a club on board, so I make the fold, and we are going to move on to the next one. But I should note that it's important to not get distracted at the tables, as I would have played these hands differently and the outcomes probably would have been way different. But that's just the nature of trying to play poker, focus on the table, take notes of the action, and record the hands. It is a lot to do. If you've never tried it before, it's quite overwhelming at times, but I try my best to navigate through it. Sometimes it does take away from me playing my best poker, but it's just the nature of doing this, and I always try my best. Alright, I got my food and stepped away from the table to eat it, and oh my goodness, if you guys have not tried the food at TCH Las Colinas, you guys are missing out. My favorite dish there is the chimichurri rice, and I usually get it with either 4 ounces of steak or some shrimp. It is absolutely delicious. The food is super tasty. I've never had a bad meal there, so make sure you check it out. So I'm back in the action now, and I sit back down as there's a limp under the gun for $2, a limper in middle position, and then the player to my right in the hijack, he raises to $12. I'm next to act and look down at 9-10 of spades. Now it's time to assert aggression. I'm focused and back ready to play. We're going to 3-bet this one as it plays very, very well post, and we have position against a player on my right who is very competent and is going to be opening a wider range than normal. So I put in the 3-bet to $45. My opponent makes the call, so we are going to go heads up to a flop of ace, queen, 9, rainbow. My opponent checks it over to me, and on this board texture, I actually wasn't sure what my bet size should be. However, I figured something small would be adequate, and after looking up the spot, as you can see, the solver wants us to go 10 or 25% pot, so in this case, I did bet $40. We have position on this board that heavily favors our 3-betting range against our opponent. He's going to have a tough time continuing with a lot of his hands being out of position, especially on this board texture. So he doesn't think very long before putting in the fold, and it felt good after feeling like I didn't play those other hands very well to win this spot in a 3-bet pot. In this hand, I look down at the beautiful 9-10 of hearts under the gun, and I raise to $14. Then a player in the cutoff who's been fairly active, 3-betting some of the time and putting in raises pre-flop, he raises to $30. Folds back around to me, and I'm facing pretty much a min raise. Our hand doesn't really want to do anything here other than put in the call. Our hand plays well post-flop, so folding seems bad, raising seems worse, so we are stuck in Callville. We are going to go heads up to a flop of king, queen, 8 with 1 heart. I check it over to my opponent, and he puts out a bet of of $35. This is just about half pot, and if he bet any bigger, I don't think that we can continue. However, with this bet size, I think we have just enough equity to put in the call and see if we can spike a jack, catch a heart, or some sort of straight card. So I do put in the call. The turn is an offsuit 5, so we totally brick out any of our equity. I chug it over to my opponent, and he bombs yet again for $75. A little bit unfortunate, but this particular hand is just going to have to fold, and we're going to try and battle this player and get him in another pot. In this hand, the same player who 3-bet me last hand, he raises under the gun $12. And then the under the gun 1 player makes the call, and then I look down on the hijack at the beautiful king queen of clubs. This one is definitely going to be putting in the 3-bet, but before I can put out my bet, player on my left didn't see that I had cards and puts out his $12. Once he does that, I'm still going to put in the 3-bet and I make it $45. He then doesn't think very long before putting in the call on the button for the 45. So we are going to go heads up to a flop of 10 deuce 6 with 1 club. So being in a 3-bet pot, out of position, facing the buttons range, we are actually going to be mixing between betting and checking. I think in a 3-bet pot, it's always okay to put in a small bet out of position. However, we also can have some check raises in our range, and I think king queen of clubs in this spot is the perfect candidate to be a check raise here. We have 2 overs, a backdoor flush draw, and a backdoor straight draw. And currently, if my opponent has any type of 1 pair holding or ace high, we are behind. So we don't necessarily always have showdown value. So I actually check, planning to check raise if my opponent puts in a bet. However, my opponent lands on a check, so we head to a turn card, which is the ace of diamonds. I think our hand has to start blasting the turn, and we are going to have to go for it on the river, unless of course we improve. So our club flush draw doesn't come in, however we do now have a gutter, and the ace on the board is going to deter my opponent unless of course he has an ace in his hand, so we are going to bet $65. My opponent doesn't think very long before putting in the fold, so luckily we don't have to empty the clip with this one, and we get it through with the king high. In one of the last hands of the night, I 3-bet the ace-queen offsuit to $50 and I get 2 callers. The flop comes all low cards, we check it through, the turn is another low card, and then one of my opponents bets $85 and I put in the fold, and that's gonna do it for this session. Overall, I think I misplayed a bunch of spots today. There was a lot of hands that I should have took the more aggressive route and didn't, and it ended up costing me a lot of big blinds and ROI in the session. So again, it's a hard thing to balance playing poker and also vlogging. It's something I'm still trying to get better at, but at least I know the areas I made mistakes in so I can improve for next time. Remember, poker is a lifelong journey. We're never going to play perfectly and we're never going to have all the answers, but the beautiful thing is we can always learn, get better, improve, and come back the next session and play better. And if you're wondering what I use to track all of my stats, I use Poker Analytics. It's the best and most intuitive app out there to track all the stats that you need for your poker ventures. And to download it, click the link below now.
Alright, well, not the most interesting vlog, and honestly was pretty distracted during a few hands and played them very, very subpar, so that's on me. Did not play a few hands well, should have took the more aggressive route and put in 3 bets, but instead chose to just call and put myself in tough spots, so not how I would normally play those hands. So sometimes when you're vlogging and you're trying to take notes, you're distracted, and then I ended up calling in spots that I should have put in a 3-bet or folded, really. So anyway, that's on me. Anyway, we got pretty lucky with the queens versus jacks in that straddled pot, and then kind of just didn't really get much going besides that. So we were in the game for $300, cashed out with $525 for a profit of $225. If you guys enjoyed the vlog, would you do me a huge favor and go all in and like, comment, and subscribe? It would mean the world to me. We are just getting started. It's only up from here, and I'll see you guys next time.